apocalypse from a legal point of view, focusing on nuclear weapons and disarmament. And in particular, I would like to focus on a very recent treaty, so an international agreement, that was concluded on the prohibition of nuclear weapons in 2017, so last year. Nuclear weapons are the most dangerous weapons on Earth. One can destroy a whole city, potentially killing millions and jeopardizing the natural environment and lives of future generations through its long-term catastrophic effects. The danger from such weapons arises from their very existence. Nuclear weapons have only been used twice in warfare, as you will see in a while. About 22,000 reportedly remain in our world today, reportedly, so maybe more. And there have been over 2,000 nuclear tests conducted to date. So disarmament is the best protection, and indeed this session is prevention, so disarmament is the best protection against such dangers. The United Nations has sought to, through different measures, to eliminate such weapons. So the first resolution was adopted by the UN General Assembly in 1946, so soon after the Second World War, and it established a commission to deal with problems related to the discovery of atomic energy, among others. And then there are a number of multilateral treaties. I'm sure that you have heard about the Treaty on the No Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons. This treaty has 191 states that ratified, so meaning that states have accepted legal obligations stemming from this treaty. However, in this treaty there is a distinction between no-nuclear weapon states and nuclear weapon states, that they have different legal obligations. And moreover, also North Korea withdrew from this treaty in 2003 using the withdrawal clause that it is included in the treaty itself. There have been other treaties, like the treaty banning nuclear weapon tests, and also bilateral and plurilateral treaties, also at regional level. And very recently, this treaty that I was mentioning at the beginning, 7th of July 2017, the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. And it was interesting for me and linked to apocalypse because of the language that is used in the treaty. So for example, the treaty has a preamble, so the first part of the treaty, saying deeply concerned about the catastrophic humanitarian consequences. And this adjective, catastrophic, is repeated several times throughout the text. The risks posed by the continued existence of nuclear weapons, then recognizing again the catastrophic consequences of nuclear weapons, and that the fact that these consequences transcend national borders. And then also the treaty invokes ethical imperatives for nuclear disarmament, and it mentions unacceptable suffering, and then again abhorrent against the principle of humanity. And the purpose, prohibition of this treaty is exactly to prohibit, not to regulate, not to conduct a sort of progressive disarmament, but to prohibit. Indeed, Article 1 says each state party undertakes never, under any circumstance, to develop, test, produce, acquire, possess, or stockpile nuclear weapons. So you might say, well, that's nice, very important achievement. Yes, of course, but the problem is that we have only 7 parties, so 7 states only ratified the treaties, including Cuba and Mexico. And when the treaty was adopted, nuclear states and all NATO states abstained, so including Italy. So they abstained regarding this treaty. That really has the purpose to prohibit any kind of nuclear weapon. The conference that anticipated the adoption of the treaty seem to be extremely positive in the outcome, but we will see. Actually only 1 year has passed. Maybe I'm too pessimistic, but I don't think that the number will increase that much soon, at least. And the prohibition of nuclear weapons, that is essential from an international point of view, is part of the process of prohibiting weapons. Biological weapons were prohibited by a treaty in 1972, chemical weapons 1993. You know what is going on with regard to the use of chemical weapons these days. Landmines 1997, cluster munitions 2008, and now nuclear weapons 2017. With regard to states like North Korea, the United Nations has adopted 9 major resolutions that asks North Korea to cease any illicit activity, to seize any illicit activity, and calls upon North Korea to rejoin the No Proliferation Program. From an international law point of view, the use of nuclear weapons is against human rights law, environmental law, humanitarian law, whether used during wars and conflicts. And it is time, I think, as position of international lawyer, that the International Court of Justice reconsiders one opinion that rendered in 1996. The International Court of Justice rendered an opinion quite controversial in 1996, because the court that solves disputes between states, it is in The Hague, and it is the court of the United Nations, actually was asked, so it's an opinion, not compulsory, but it was asked whether there was a prohibition at the international level with regard to the use of nuclear weapons. And the opinion was quite controversial, because the International Court of Justice said that it is true that the use of nuclear weapons is prohibited because it is contrary to human rights law, humanitarian law, but, and this but is quite worrying, but it cannot be excluded in extreme circumstances, like in self-defense, using low-yield tactical nuclear weapons. But I think that after 20 years, it is time that also this opinion is reconsidered according to the practice. And what happens when a country does not adhere to a convention like the one of 2017 and develops nuclear weapons? We have seen the case of North Korea, so the pressure put by the international community to cease this illicit activity. But would intervention, military intervention, be legitimized? Well, this is extremely controversial, and it is a matter of discussion. And of course, you can relate this debate with the debate on chemical weapons, whose prohibition is clearly established at international level, and that's caused the intervention that you all know and you read in the news, contrary to international law, but supported by this necessity that was invoked by the states. And so to conclude, apocalypse is, according to my view from an international law point of view, is the use of nuclear weapons, because in all cases it would violate fundamental human rights law and humanitarian law. The process has started to eliminate these weapons, but again, and this is not a matter of law but a matter of politics, the will of states is not concrete enough to establish a complete prohibition of those weapons. Thank you.
Kawamoto was a 13-year-old student at a middle school in Hiroshima, only about a half-mile from the site of the explosion. In the moment of impact, most of his classmates were instantly killed. Those left alive cried out or seemed to try to attract the attention of anyone who might help. The horror, however, had only just begun. But then the singing and the cries grew weaker. My classmates were dying one by one. That made me very frightened. I struggled to free myself from the broken fragments and looked around. I thought that gas tanks had exploded. Through a hole in the roof, I could see clouds swirling in a cone. Some were black, some pink. There were fires in the middle of the clouds. I checked my body. 3 upper teeth were chipped off. Perhaps a roof tile had hit me. My left arm was pierced by a piece of wood that stuck in my flesh like an arrow. Unable to put it out, I tied a piece of clothes around my upper arm to stanch the flow of blood. I had no other injuries, but I did not run away. We were taught that it was cowardly to desert one's classmates. I crawled about the rubble, calling, "Is there anyone alive?" Then I saw an arm shifting under planks of wood. Ota, my friend, was moving, but I could see that his back was broken, and I had to pull him up into the clear. Ota was looking at me with his left eye. His right eyeball was hanging from his face. I think he said something, but I could not make it out. Pieces of nails were stuck on his lips. He took a student handbook from his pocket. I asked, "Do you want me to give this to your mother?" Ota nodded. A moment later, he died. By now, the school was engulfed in flames. I started to walk away, and then looked back. Ota was staring at me with his one good eye. I can see still that eye in the dark.
We'll meet again. Don't know where, don't know when, but I know we'll meet again some sunny day. Keep smiling through, just like you always do, till the blue skies drive the dark clouds far away. So will you please say hello to the folks that I know? Tell them I won't be long. They'll be happy to know that as you say hello, I was singing this song. We'll meet again, don't know where, don't know when, but I know we'll meet again some sunny day. Keep smiling through, just like you always do, till the blue skies drive the dark clouds far away. So will you please say hello to the folks that I know? Tell them I won't be long. And they'll be happy to know that as you saw me go, I was singing this song. We'll meet again, don't know where, don't know when, but I know we'll meet again some sunny day. Keep smiling through, just like you always do, till the blue skies drive the dark clouds far away.
Okay, sometimes it's difficult to speak after such a performance. But the citation, the quotation by Kenneth seems relevant in this context. There is some link between the performance and the course on innovation and social change. It's technology that can be a good thing for humankind and sometimes not so good. And our contribution to this workshop will be two contributions by a student of this course. I asked the students to make some exercise during this semester, some kind of creativity exercise. As you know, innovation is nowadays present everywhere. We innovate for everything. And in firms and as in institutions, a lot of rules have been developed to manage innovations. So with management innovation, there is a lot of rules, a lot of bureaucracy, and there is quite nothing new because there is no place for creativity. So now we have rules for creativity, that's design thinking, and there is some kind of paradox to try to integrate rules to develop creativity. Nevertheless, this can be helpful. So I asked to the student to work in groups. The objective is that they work together, whatever will be the result. One of the uniqueness of VIU is the fact that we have students and professors from not all over the world, but from many different countries. So each group has been constituted with some kind of equilibrium, not so much equilibrium, in gender issue, in nationality, in discipline, and I asked them to prepare something about innovation and apocalypse. They were free to decide what will be their topic, what support they can produce. It can be a paper, it can be a PowerPoint presentation, a video, a painting, a poem, or whatever, a song. But they decide both to create 2 videos. Last year, we had the same kind of exercise with this course, and we had at that time 4 groups, and among 4 groups, 3 groups decide to develop a prototype of applications. So application, last year's videos, this year's, that's really, we are in a period of time associated to digitalization. So the first video is a little bit pessimistic. The title is Survivor, the second one is High or Fire. Maybe someone can present the first video. Who will present the video? Sarah?
So hi everyone, we have created a short video about innovation and artificial intelligence. So the idea of the video is to question what will be the future of robotics and artificial intelligence, and what will be their consequences on humanity. We also wanted to raise awareness on the emerging ethical issues that concern science and technology. This video will be about a dystopian post-apocalyptic world, and I hope you will enjoy it.
What is that? Is that a human? It cannot be. Not here. I thought they were almost extinct. Oh, it's waking up. Is it Earth? It doesn't look dangerous. It looks more confused.
How did it all start in the first place? Right, the war. A war so devastating that it almost led to the extinction of humanity. Now you may be asking yourselves, why would robots want to destroy humans? They created them after all. On the other side, the humans created them just to make their lives easier, to use them as slaves.
You're all killers. Down in the real world, we're faced with ugly choices. I'm sorry, I know you mean well. You want to protect the world, but you don't want it to change. There's only one path to peace.
The problem with humans is that they don't allow the cycle of life to continue. They kill for pleasure, they contaminate because they do not care and do not clean up after themselves out of laziness. They are greedy and selfish, only thinking about themselves. But what about the rest of the species?
Should I report it? Of course I have to.
As this week we have studied the intellectual property right, you have a lot of credits through different accept. So the second video has a
Hello, Mr. X5000 and Mrs. Smith. I am Mr. Knowledge, the principal of this school. I will make a decision whom to employ based on the results of this debate. You can start when you're ready.
I have 15 years of experience and I can teach children to be creative. I will evaluate the children's performance not based on algorithm but based on the general uniqueness of a child, his personality.
I am a perfect teacher of the 21st century. I am 100% efficient, secure and friendly. I have 700 gigabit of knowledge to give. I can teach 24 hours a day. I will teach children how to use computer from their early years.
I will teach children to think. I will teach them compassion, understanding, empathy, and flexibility.
Flexibility, you said? I can do it much better. I am one of the most flexible robots in the world. I can bend my body twice and feel no pain. I will show it to children as they will learn how to be flexible as well.
I can develop best teaching approaches, capture attention, develop imagination, so develop critical thinking of children.
Last question. Students at this age are very energetic. Imagine yourself coming late to class, finding it in a chaotic situation where two of your students are fighting. You try to stop them and ask what happened. One defends himself and they start to fight again after the other shouts, "Liar, liar, pants on fire." What would you do?
Fire, 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 alert, fire, fire, fire.
Thank you for your convincing arguments. I have taken into consideration all of them. My final choice is Mrs. Smith. She is a professional who can make decisions. I can give you a position as the assistant of Mrs. Smith. Your highly technological skills will be used to make the teaching process more interactive, and you will work under her supervision and follow her command.
Prova.
Okay. So this morning I talked a little bit about how, in my conception at least, theology meets history in talking about an event in the 1860s in Japan. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about how history, in a sense, meets theology or spirituality in the context of the 2011 catastrophe in Japan. So on March the 11th, 2011, a massive level 9 earthquake struck the northeast coast of Japan. As you all know, I think, was followed by a devastating tsunami. The tsunami was the most destructive of the three disasters. It killed close to 20,000 people. And that, though, in turn was followed by the most dramatic event, the nuclear meltdown in the Fukushima power plant. I actually was supposed to be going to Japan just a couple of weeks after this. I ended up having to postpone my trip. My university actually wouldn't allow me to go for a couple of months, but I did eventually go to Japan in the summer of 2011. And among the things that I did while I was there, I traveled up to through the earthquake zone and actually sort of out on the other side in the far northeast of Japan. And I went to a mountain in northeastern Japan called Osorezan, which translates as the mountain of fear, where the arrow is pointing at. And when you climb this mountain, which has been a spiritual site in Japan for many, many centuries, you find a devastated volcanic landscape at the top, which is dominated by a lake which is completely full of sulfur. So it smells very, very strong, and there is no life at all in this lake. And in the volcanic landscape all around the lake, there is a temple, and there are also many spontaneous memorials. And on the weekend when I visited Osorezan, this place was full of people. And I realized soon that they were all families of earthquake victims. So they had come to this place following a very long tradition to find some kind of spiritual comfort after the deaths of their loved ones. Along the banks of the lake, there are also many spontaneous memorials. And in particular, particularly striking, there was a whole section of the beach where these plastic windmills were placed. Every one of these represents a lost child. And it was in the summer of 2011, it was particularly heartbreaking because of the 20,000 people who were killed in the tsunami, only a small fraction had actually been found, and the rest were considered in a limbo state. They were not officially dead, but everyone, I guess, knew that they would never come again. But the families that I spoke to there had not been able to have funerals for these loved ones, and they were still in a state of not being able to have any kind of closure. Also on this mountain, there are women. Very few of them left now, but there have been many of them in the past who are shamanesses, people who will undertake to connect you to your dead person and conduct a conversation with your dead person. So this mountain has always been a place of connection and communication with the dead. And more broadly, what I would like to talk about is the role of mountains in Japanese spirituality, and particularly their connection to death and renewal. So Japan, as you sure know, is an extremely mountainous country. And for many, many centuries, in fact, probably it's the oldest spiritual tradition in Japan, the mountains have been a place of worship. So even today, you will see some very, incongruous-looking people who spend their entire lives practicing spiritual austerities in the mountain. And what the logic of this is that through experiencing the fear that you find in the mountains, they are gaining spiritual power that they can then bring back into the lowlands and use that power to help people. And this combines a lot of different traditions. So there is a strong tradition of shamanism in this. Many of these people claim to be able to communicate directly with your deceased relatives. There's also an element of power for healing. So these mountains are populated by, I'll come back to these, populated by terrifying looking deities, and in the mountains you will communicate directly with these deities, you will establish power over them, and you will then be able to use their power to help people back in the low parts of the country. And this kind of spiritual power is gained mostly through asceticism. So some of these people will deliberately have themselves hung off the edge of cliffs. Others will stand under waterfalls. I took this photograph on a snowy February day. Others will walk over burning soil. Many ways in which they establish their power and mastery over the frightening things that you find in the mountains. And through all of these, there is the sense of the connection to death, because the mountains are the liminal place between the plains where most people live and the gods. And this is where you will find the deities and also be able perhaps to communicate with the spirits of people who are somewhere between the level of people and deity, in other words, dead people. During the course of my travels, the most surprising place that I found was a mountain called Mount Yudono in the city of Sakata in northwestern Japan. And these are just some of the things that you find wandering around in the mountains. Very lonely trails, occasionally places of spiritual comfort, like this beautiful pagoda, and sometimes in surprising places, shamans practicing their spiritual practice. So, Sakata, this is Mount Yudono. There's a temple that I visited in Mount Yudono that contains these two cases. And I don't know how well you can see, but in each of these cases is a corpse. And in fact, these corpses are mummies. And the unusual feature of these particular individuals is that they are self-mummified. That's to say, rather than being embalmed and mummified after death, they prepared their own bodies during their lifetimes so that they would not decay. And they did that through a very, very long process of self-denial. So starting with many, many years of ascetic lifestyle, and then in the final years of their lives, they went to live on the mountainside through the bitter winters of this part of the country and starve themselves, basically. They call it in Japanese mokujiki, which means literally eating wood. They starved themselves, and finally, when they felt that they had prepared their bodies through self-denial, they dug a hole for themselves, got into the hole, had a disciple stand outside, and they rang a bell every couple of hours. When the bell stopped ringing, the disciple knew that they had actually ceased to be living. And after some period of months, they would then dig them out of this hole, and hopefully their bodies would have been preserved through this long process that they had gone through. In this temple that I visited, these are 300 years old, these mummies. During those 300 years, pilgrims would come, and the temple would allow them to slice off a small piece of the flesh of the mummy, and they would eat it. And this was their connection to death. And the priest of this temple explained to me how important it is for us to have this kind of a physical connection to the spiritual aspect of death. And indeed, that these people had made the ultimate sacrifice, not just as a kind of crazy practice, but to show their own power over death and to help us achieve salvation through their sacrifice, through our ability to share in the sacrifice that they had made. So the mountains in Japan are a place of spiritual renewal. One priest described it to me as a place where you go to be frightened, you go to be lonely, you go to suffer perhaps, but you also go there to experience your connection to the Buddha, that you feel the Buddha inside yourself through the experience of being in the mountains. They are places of fear, but that helps us confront the reality of death. They're places where death feels close. And ultimately, they are places of salvation, where we conquer our fear and we connect to a nature that includes life and death, but is also beyond life and death. Thank you.
Professor Yuval Portugali sent us a few slides to conclude the plenary, and Josh kindly accepted to read them.
From the population bomb to creative destruction, 6 notes on apocalypse. Apocalypse, similarly to utopia, is, I suggest, an outcome of a kind of cognitive dissonance between a cognitive capability and a cognitive limitation of humans. The capability is chronesthesia, referring to human ability to mentally travel back in time, travel in time back to the past, but also forward to the future. Not only that we can, but we cannot mentally travel. Studies show that more than 50% of our time we are not here and now. The limitations concern unpredictability. Complexity theories teach us that complex systems, like environment, society, or a city, are unpredictable, not because of lack of data, but because of their very nature. Depending on one's chronic character and mental tendencies, this cognitive dissonance is solved by apocalyptic destructive visions, or optimistic utopian ones. The relations between humans and their environment accompanies socio-scientific discourse from its early days. A well-known example is Malthus's apocalyptic scientific prediction about the inevitability of population explosion. Population, he suggested, is growing exponentially, whereas society's means of subsistence linearly. This implies, he wrote, a strong and constantly operating check on population from the difficulty of subsistence. Herbert Spencer took Malthus's apocalyptic vision prediction and turned it upside down. The inevitable clash between subsistence and population is the engine of progress. It forces humans and societies to be creative. From the beginning, the pressure of population has been the proximate cause of progress. In between Malthus and Spencer, after reading Malthus, Verhulst introduced the famous logistic curve, which at a later stage paved the way to the notion of environmental carrying capacity. Using his conceptualization, we can comparatively describe the pessimistic, optimistic, and neutral views on the environment-society relation as follows. Three other persons should be added to the Malthus-Spencer views. One was Marx, who criticized the very population environment or subsistence exposition. The key relations, according to him, are between humans to humans, while the population-environment relations are a derivation or representation. A second person was Darwin, with his theory of evolution that combines his innovative process of random mutations with the Malthusian notion of environmental check on the population. The third was Schumpeter, who popularized the notion of creative destruction. Creative destruction. The concept was popularized by Schumpeter in his evolutionary view on the capitalist economy. Inspired by Marx's criticism of capitalism, development is, and Darwin's notion of mutations, creative destruction suggests that economic development is driven by the discontinuous emergence of new combinations or innovations that are economically more viable than the old way of doing things, and that innovation can be seen as industrial mutation that incessantly revolutionized the economic structure from within, incessantly destroying the old one, incessantly creating a new one, a process he called creative destruction. The hero of Schumpeter's innovation is the economic entrepreneur whose creative activities revolutionize the pattern of production. My personal view, based as it is on my studies of complexity theories of cities, is that the hero of urban innovation is an anti-hero, an ordinary person, an urban agent whose personal activities, usually unintentionally, give rise to a phased transition in the structure of the city. 1 as 6. Apocalypse, similarly to utopia, is, I suggest, an outcome of a kind of cognitive dissonance between a cognitive capability and a cognitive limitation of humans. The capability is chronesthesia, referring to human ability to mentally travel. Oh, have I just done that twice? No, that is, it's, oh. I don't know, I think it might be a different slide. I don't know. No, I did read all of that, didn't I? So, it all depends on your mental inclinations. If you are pessimistic, if you are a pessimist, I didn't see these slides beforehand, so bear with me. If you are a pessimist, your mental time travel to the future is rather apocalyptic. If you are an optimist, utopian. Where are you?
Hey, ladies and gentlemen, hello. Hello. My name is Gad Kaynar. I'm the director of the performative part of this workshop, and I recommend to you to be utopianly optimistic and creative, and we are not as many people as we were in the morning, so please, I urge you to stay, and I assure you that you'll suffer but enjoy. What I would like to ask you is to clear this room, because we have to change the structure of this room. It will take just a few minutes, and please don't come in without being invited. Thank you.